and welcome everyone to another one of my videos. This time I'm going to check out the plugin Cabinetron, which I've been giving a free license of. Cabinetron is a convolver which lets you import up to 8 impulse responses that you can use in parallel, mixed in a very unique way with each other to create your own cabinet sounds. And when I say unique way, I'm talking about this thing here. You basically have some sort of XY pad, but like XY in quotations, because as you can see, it's more than just 4 edges. It's actually always the amount of edges that you have impulse responses in the plugin. And yeah, you can move this point around and find the perfect sound. But before jumping into the plugin, I want to show you the situation that triggered me to want to have something like that. Okay, so lately I made this video in which I checked out some sort of AI-based sample picker from, what was it? From Output. At some point I had this sound and it really didn't want to merge with the rest of the mix. So I felt like, okay, that's a situation where you can sometimes use a convolver, and if you're lucky you find a flavor that kind of fits into the mix a little bit better. Let's watch this together. I could imagine making this sort of sound like an amp though. Let's see, what can we do when we're slapping a convolver on it? So this is my typical convolver workflow. Just taking some impulse response, making it really short, using the envelope to make it even shorter, and then play around with the brightness. And immediately a brighter sound that just translates much better in the mix. But it's always a guess game. I mean, okay, you can try different impulse responses, but sometimes it's very far away from the dry signal. Sometimes the dry signal was already good, but you just want to find something in the middle between the dry signal and the wet signal, and it's like really hard to find a compromise, because using convolvers is rarely compromise work. It's usually you either use this or use this thing. And I think Cabinetron tries to solve that with this convolver interpolation stuff. So that's what we are going to explore today. So here's a little project. It's not like the craziest project of all time. Currently I just have this project, but I will still use it as an example for this experiment. So I think it feels better without the acoustic guitar, but I do like the acoustic guitar. So let's just try to save the acoustic guitar with Cabinetron. So I will now add an impulse response that I already made earlier, which I called first one for A guitar, and I also made this on this A guitar by importing a bunch of other impulse responses from the factory ones, and basically made this sound. But now we try to go even further with that. So first of all, I want to show you the factory ones. I still have to explore them myself. The names, I guess they describe some real life cabinets, but I'm not an expert on those. So I will just click on something that sounds cool to me, like Mars. I'm kind of spacey, so I do like when things have a name like a planet. And yeah, now a bit untypical for something that has a file browser is that there is no way to preview the sound character. I think it might be cool if there was something like a little preview thing where maybe the impulse response is being applied to some piece of white noise or something that makes it imaginable what the flavor is like. But okay, let's just try it like this. So as you can hear, all of these impulse responses are really similar to each other. It's sometimes very hard to distinguish their qualities from one another. When I tested this earlier today, I felt like at least going between different folders has a different flavor. So maybe we should try different folders before trying different impulse responses from a folder. Okay, I like this one. It has a bit of a brighter sound. The one that I made earlier already has quite a dull sound. So now we have a brighter one here, and we can play around with the other controls to find out what they can do for us. I don't know yet what the mutations are for. It's a very subtle change in flavor. Smoothing is basically applying a low pass filter to the spectrum instead of to the signal itself, to the impulse response itself. Smoothing out the differences between the different bins in a Fourier transform kind of way. And Fred is kind of adding some grid to the high end. And these are microphone position parameters. Okay, great. Now let's play both of them together. I think they sound nice together, but I want to find out what it feels like to move the face around. Here we have a setting that sounds very out of phase, so let's try to flip the polarity. Oh, that's interesting. Now we have kind of a null test between this impulse response and this one. So we hear that the difference is mainly in the high end. Okay, great. But let's try the auto phase feature. You can right click on the things and just say that it should automatically figure out a phase alignment, and it put it here. Now it would be great now if there was the ability to just disable the phase correction without having to drag this, so that I can check AB if the auto phasing did something cool. It does sound good though, so I guess I just trust the process. So let's add another impulse response. Now I want something with a lot of body. Wait, can I double click on these? Oh, I'm glad I can. I gotta say, let's just take a minute to appreciate how good the workflows in this plugin are. You can double click on impulse response, you don't have to drag them like I just did. And something that I noticed earlier already is there is actually sensitive drag on shift and sensitive mouse wheel also on shift, and normal mouse wheel and normal drag. It distinguishes between all of these things. I haven't talked about this for a long time. In my earlier videos, I always talked about that when I tested the plugins, and I felt like it got kind of boring because all of the plugins messed it up anyway, and I didn't wanna feel like I'm just talking shit about everyone. But here is actually an example of a plugin that does it well, that just does it the way it has to be done. It implements all of the sensitive control features that can be implemented, and yeah, that's just nice. That's just how it can be, and that's cool. Great job. Okay, I think I like this one a little bit. Phase align. So this time it didn't do anything. Maybe I have to activate the other ones for that. No? Or maybe the perfect phase is already on 0 milliseconds. I mean, why not? I would assume that whoever made these factory presets already made sure that most of them are kind of working together with each other very well. Okay, let's tweak this one a little bit. Okay, and now the interesting part, interpolating between the different impulse responses. How does that feel? gotta say, I wanna stick to the one that I made earlier already anyway. But I can still use these two in a cool way, for example by panning them hard left right. Let's see if this works. Now we have the sides with a lot of high and low content and not much in the center. And now when I dial back in the one that is mostly centered, okay, actually sounds better when I keep the mids where they are. Okay, so as you can see, you can combine different workflows here. You can do some of the stuff with this very useful interpolation thingy. I don't know what you would call this, because it can have any shape, you know. But yeah, you can use this generally, but then you can still go on and tweak some of the balance by just turning the volume knobs individually, which is also cool. And yeah, I didn't even talk about the post EQ section yet, because you can actually apply a whole ass EQ that looks suspiciously much like Pro Q to the entire thing. And now let's talk about my absolute favorite feature, which is that you can save your impulse responses. And yeah, this saves the whole combination of things that you did as an impulse response. So I guess just the same sample rate as the project, then the longest impulse response length, because it might be a little bit bad for the CPU, but it also promises the best quality, I guess. And we use stereo and a bit depth of, I guess, 24. 60 would be enough as well, but I mean, we can select it, so let's just use 24. I just don't use 32 because there might actually be plugins that cannot read impulse responses with such a high bit depth, especially older ones. So 24 seems to be a good compromise. Save preset, I don't know. I'm not that much of a preset fan, but I will just export the impulse response now. Git 2. Now here's the thing. I like about the dry signal that it has a little bit more of that sizzle that an acoustic guitar just has. And I like about the Cabinetron version that it fits into the mix very well and has kind of a shiny tone. So what if I tried to find a compromise between the two? What if I wanted to make a layer? Now I would find it really useful if saving the impulse response was not implemented in the way that I have to select things and then put something into a folder, but more like just pressing a button and then it will consolidate within the plugin into the first row of things and then remove the other ones all in one step. That would be kind of the maximum workflow that squeezes the essence out of this core idea. But still, I will just use this workflow now and just call this sample Git 3, because for what I want to do now, I need this to be just one impulse response. So unload impulse response and now Git 3. Now I need this to be phase aligned with the dry signal, but the dry signal is not in the plugin. And I think in order to work with the autocorrelation thing, I would have to load an impulse response that only consists of a single impulse and then use auto phase align on that. I'm not even sure if the auto phase align feature is designed to work with such inputs. So I will just use the manual approach for now, in which I turn this parameter while simply listening to the sound. Great, I like that. Yeah, I think there is still a lot to explore when it comes to Cabinetron. For example, how would it behave with other third-party impulse responses, maybe ones that even try to be a little bit longer. It seems like all of the factory ones are designed to be extremely short, so maybe it just doesn't like longer samples. I haven't tested that yet, so that's something that I want to test. And also how the impulse responses that I design in Cabinetron perform in other convolvers. Theoretically, they should work just the same, and that would be kind of cool because I am missing some features here. For example, one feature that I always like in plugins like convolution or kilohertz convolver is that you can retune the impulse response to a different pitch, 1 octave down or 1 octave up. Especially 1 octave up is really useful because a lot of impulse responses have the tendency to make a signal a little bit more dull, and the ones in Cabinetron are not an exception of that, mostly because they are made for guitars and based on cabinets, which also have this property. And yeah, a very effective way of getting around that is usually just tuning impulse responses up. And this plugin has a lot more ways to tweak the impulse response here than this convolver, which is greatly appreciated, but it just lacks the pitch control. So I could imagine loading this impulse response into this convolver and even improving it even more. It's really nice when there is just a plugin that combines all the important features in one single interface for workflow reasons. And I think Cabinetron does a great job of doing all these things. I think it's pretty evident from what we just saw that you can easily find an in-between spot between different impulse responses to just find where exactly the sound wants to sit. And that's a big difference to most convolvers, where it's always something that is just somewhere there and not exactly there. So yeah, Cabinetron solves the problem that I hoped it would.